One of the most beloved entries in the golden era of Final Fantasy, and yet somehow one of the most underrated at the same time, Final Fantasy Tactics is finally back in the spotlight after more than 25 years since its original release in 1997, with the Ivalice Chronicles. And with many thanks to Square Enix, I've had the opportunity to play this game in its entirety early and bring you guys this review. So given that Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favourite games in the entire franchise, you can imagine how excited I've been for this release. But does the story of Ramza, Delita, and indeed the world of Ivalice itself still hold up after so many years? Well, let's dive in and find out. Final Fantasy Tactics follows Ramza Beowulf, a young nobleman caught in the power struggle in the events leading up to and during the War of the Lions, a clash of corrupt aristocrats, power-hungry members of the church, and common folk fighting for survival and aiming to exact revenge against their unfavourable situations, as well as the higher classes they feel caused them. What begins as a tale of political intrigue quickly spirals into something greater, introducing forces of a supernatural nature and beyond. Let me just get this out of the way now. I adore Final Fantasy Tactics. It's actually one of my favourite games in the entire pantheon of Final Fantasy games, and I've played them all. One of the main reasons that the original Final Fantasy Tactics, as well as Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which I'd love to see a remake of next please, has stood out to me so much against the other games in the series is the maturity and the grounded nature of its storytelling. While, yes, there are monsters and demons and supernatural beings present in the game, the story is predominantly one of man versus man, as opposed to teenager versus god, which far too many JRPGs fall into in my opinion. Yes, I'm looking at you, Persona and Kingdom Hearts. While there are definitely morally corrupt characters throughout the game, there are some that you might find yourself agreeing with despite their actions, and a lot of what Tactics boils down to is point of view, which gives the player, including me, having spent 40 hours clearing just the main story in the Ivalice Chronicles, a lot to think about, even though I'm already very familiar with what happens in the game. It's a very interesting revisit from a story perspective, as the aspects that might have jumped out at me when I first played it as a young teenager weren't the same as what gave me pause for thought as an adult. Characters like siblings Rafa and Marak present extremely dark and mature themes of abuse and Stockholm Syndrome that completely went over my head the first time around, and after playing this game again, I absolutely maintain that Delita is one of the single best characters Square Enix has ever written. Honestly, I could write entire essays about why Delita is such a genius character, but I think maybe perhaps that's better saved for another video, if you guys want it of course. The Ivalice Chronicles presents this story to a whole new audience, with overhaul visuals, full voice acting, and multiple ways of re-exploring events and people through the new encyclopedia pages for those who wish to want to learn more about them. Visually, this game has done a great job of retaining the essence of the original Final Fantasy Tactics, similar to what we've seen before with Tactics Ogre Reborn, with new sprite work, portraits, and sharper environments. The overhaul isn't quite on the same level as something you'd see in Dragon Quest 1, 2, or 3 HD2D, for example, which would have been a very interesting take on this game, but it definitely serves its purpose, not being too detailed or cluttered to keep track of given the large number of units on the screen and the isometric view. I can't tell you enough how much of a difference the voice acting and the rewriting of the script to closer match the War of the Lions version of this game has made to it. It's actually quite transformative in that the plot is significantly easier to follow thanks to vocalization of the archaic style of speaking present in Final Fantasy Tactics in general. And the voice cast does an absolutely magnificent job across the board with these characters. It's actually really impressive how much range each actor shows given how limited the characters' animations are due to the nature of the game. But it's done brilliantly here, and you'll come to love, and hate, certain characters even more because of it. The music in the game is largely untouched, which I do feel is a little bit of a shame, but that comes from being a big fan of the source material already. It would have been nice to have heard a reorchestrated version of tracks like Precipitous Combat or Anti-Pyretic, amongst others, as I've always found that the Evolution games like this one and Final Fantasy XII have a certain je ne sais quoi about them that I'd have loved to have seen expanded on. But it's still an amazing soundtrack, so you're not losing out by not having it redone here. Most of the sound effects have been redone though, so any returning players expecting to hear the funny noises characters make when they're KO'd might find that they're surprised at their absence. But don't worry, Chocobos still make crazy noises. Something I've always appreciated about Final Fantasy Tactics is that despite the richness of its characters, lore, world building, etc., all the qualities one expects from a quality JRPG story, it never bogs you down in cutscenes. You never feel like you're stuck being unable to actually play the game. I often find that if a game is able to tell its story well in a succinct and streamlined manner, it's a benefit of using the medium of a video game to tell that story, and Final Fantasy Tactics does this extremely well indeed. All of these aspects make the Ivalice Chronicles by far the best delivery of the story Final Fantasy Tactics has ever had. The localization changes are much cleaner and clearer than they've ever been, the voiceovers that support these changes pull the player in ways that have never been done before, and there's just a flow to this version of the game that there's never been previously, which very much carries over into the gameplay itself too. To those who've not played Final Fantasy Tactics before, at its core, it's a grid-based strategy RPG which play out in isometric maps where the player commands their team of around 5 members, sometimes more, sometimes less, to fight an enemy team through careful positioning, awareness of terrain, and a plethora of skills and abilities obtained through the game's job system. The job system in Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the deepest that Final Fantasy has ever had. Players start with simple jobs like Squire, which grants abilities that, while very simple in nature, aid in gaining job points, or JP to learn abilities from the other jobs in the game, and then Chemist, which relies on items like potions to keep other teammates alive. And slowly as you play through the game, you'll unlock more, from knights and white mages to more advanced jobs like ninjas and the famed arithmetician. Seriously, the arithmetician is really good, just trust me on this. And abilities from each job can be transferred to the next. The player can equip an active skill tree, a reaction command, and passives obtained through other jobs to truly customize each character to the player's specifications. And jobs learned early in the game are never made redundant entirely either, as abilities like JP Boost from the Squire serve to be extremely useful throughout leveling other jobs throughout the game. And if I have one piece of advice to those starting out, do not sleep on the Chemist job. It's actually one of the best in the entire game. One problem that Tactics has always had somewhat is that while the player can create their own characters from the start of the game, and will use them for a good length of it, as they unlock story-specific characters like Agrius and Orlando, you'll find that their special jobs tend to just be stronger than a lot of what player-made characters can offer, as their unique jobs tend to be just Squire, but better in practically every way. So you might find that you're encouraged to adopt a new story character as you get them, but find you'll need to farm up JP in order to round them out, in order to have them at the same level as the characters that you were using previously, so there's some grinding involved. I mean, yeah, you can avoid this by just using the same characters throughout the entire playthrough from start to finish, but where's the fun in that? Thankfully, the grind is made much easier and flows much more pleasantly, thanks to quality of life updates new to the Ivalice Chronicles, like a speed up function which is performed by just holding the R1 button, and auto battle options, as well as being able to see the turn order at all times during gameplay, which was previously accessed through menuing and felt really clunky, certainly by today's standards. In the original Final Fantasy Tactics, you couldn't even take back your movement after deciding on it, but before taking an action of course, which was highly irksome at the time, but thankfully, that's not an issue anymore. Difficulty toggles are also new to the Ivalice Chronicles, with an easier setting for players who want to experience the story first and foremost, and a tactician difficulty for players like me who want extra challenge. After playing around with these for a while, doing submissions on tactician difficulty, but performing the majority of my playthrough on the standard difficulty, I felt that these mostly modified the levels of the enemy characters and the performance of various NPCs rather than the enemy's gear, which I was kinda hoping for, given that if an enemy has better gear, there's better things for a thief to steal for me, but in my testing I didn't notice any significant changes there. But I would be keen to see if that stays true for optional dungeons like Midlight's Deep, which I haven't done yet this time around. One of the more contentious aspects to the Ivalice Chronicles is the fact that content that was previously exclusive to the PSP version of Final Fantasy Tactics, The War of the Lions, is not present in this version of the game, with the ideology being that this version seeks to refine the original PS1 version rather than that update. This means that 2 of the jobs from that game, Onion Knight and Dark Knight, as well as 2 optional characters, Luso from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2 and Balthea from Final Fantasy 12, are missing, as well as a few side missions and a multiplayer mode. While I don't think it's a massive loss that these aspects aren't in the game, and the foundation that makes Final Fantasy Tactics is more than enough without them, I still don't fully understand the reasoning behind this decision to omit this stuff. I felt this way with the Pixel remasters too, which were missing additions made to various ports of it, like the GBA versions and the PSP versions of the first 6 Final Fantasy games. I want to ultimately call the Ivalice Chronicles the 100% de facto definitive edition of Final Fantasy Tactics without batting an eyelid, because in 99% of cases, it absolutely is that, but making the choice to actively exclude content from the game that has little to no bearing on the story baffles me, even if it is ultimately fairly inconsequential. To bolster this further, I found it extremely odd that the pre-rendered cutscenes that were originally made for War of the Lions with a beautiful sketched art style are present in the Ivalice Chronicles, but they don't play out during the part of the games in which they should. To use this early cutscene in which Ramza and Delita talk about their situation whilst bonding over using a blade of grass as a whistle, while you're playing through the game, this plays out with in-game visuals, as it did in the original PS1 version. But when you look at the encyclopedia, the option to play the pre-rendered cutscene in full upscaled glory with the current voice acting no less is present, which again, doesn't bother me per se, but does leave me tilting my head and asking, why? None of this, however, sullies what is the best delivery of a truly timeless game in the Final Fantasy pantheon. I would argue that Final Fantasy Tactics has the best story of any game in the entire franchise, and I'm extremely pleased with how well a game that's over 25 years old has translated with just a modernized look. The fact that so few changes needed to be made to the gameplay itself stands as a testament to just how good the original Final Fantasy Tactics has always been, and the changes in the presentation and the UI made me, someone who knows the game extremely well, feel like I was playing an entirely new experience. I would absolutely recommend this game even to newcomers to Final Fantasy, as while it plays differently to most games in the franchise, it still ultimately feels like a Final Fantasy game, which is something that a lot of players don't feel many of the modern games achieve. I fully plan to play this game through again to aim for the Platinum Trophy on PlayStation, despite having played it on Steam for the purposes of this review, something that you are more than welcome to come and find me do, as I'll be streaming it and I'm happy to answer any of your questions on Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. I do also think that this game works extremely well as a portable title too. Fights don't take a super long time individually, and it's broken up in such a way that it's very easy to pick up and play, but also to put down when you need to. I actually played a lot of my time with Tactics on my Steam Deck, and it worked beautifully on there. So players that are looking for a portable experience, whether it be on their Switch 2, or handheld PC, will find this to be a great fit as well. There is also an option to play the original version of Final Fantasy Tactics without any of the quality of life updates new to the Ivalice Chronicles, presented as classic mode, but I'll be honest, I didn't feel the need to explore this very much, as I've already played the original as it was first created, and was far more interested in seeing what changes the Ivalice Chronicles presented, but the option is there for those who'd like it. I loved Final Fantasy Tactics before this version was released, and I somehow now love it even more thanks to this, so yeah, I would absolutely recommend this to you. If you've never played FF Tactics, now's a brilliant time to play one of the most criminally underappreciated games of all time, and if you have, well, I'm pretty sure there's a good chance you've already pre-ordered this. But what do you think? Is the Ivalice Chronicles for you? Let me know in the comments, and if you've enjoyed this video, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel for more gaming opinions, community, reviews, and more, especially if you love Final Fantasy like I do. I've been building back up on YouTube recently after TikTok basically devoured me for the last year, and things have been going really well, so thank you all very much for watching. And of course, thank you once again to Square Enix for providing me with a copy of the Ivalice Chronicles for review. I truly adore Final Fantasy Tactics, and I'm glad I get to share that love all over again. So big shout outs to you. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've already played Final Fantasy Tactics or not, and if you have, tell me who your favourite character is and why. And with that, I shall love you and leave you. So have a great day everyone, and I'll see you next time. Take care.